What's up, guys? Welcome to I Just Want to Know. I'm Alan K.
Karmel Humphrey, how y'all feeling?
And today's episode is going to be a little bit more interesting. With everything that went on with the whole Iran situation. If you guys don't follow me on social media, Alan.Kathman on Instagram and Alan Kathman on Facebook. I encountered a really interesting conversation with somebody I went to high school with.
Okay.
Which, I think anytime we're at war or we're at potential quarrels with another country, it's really easy to point out like the divide in races that we're potentially going against, you know? And when we're discussing this, though, and we're discussing anything else, when we talked about the draft, I had a friend who said, came out really aggressively, but that, she doesn't want to support a country that hold against black people. And, when I started questioning her about that, I was like, well, why do you feel this way? Why that? And instead of dwelling on that, she decided to then attack me, told me I was white privilege, and I'm Asian. And then therefore I wouldn't understand. Right. Which I get it.
Okay.
As an Asian person, I wouldn't understand as a black person.
Okay.
And before we really get into this, I first want to make that disclaimer that this is based on what my experiences is, what Karmel's experience is. And also with this being said, Karmel has said that he is kind of uncomfortable talking about it because
I'm not uncomfortable.
But it did take some convincing for me to finally get into talking about
I just hate talking about racism.
Right.
It's
right, but I think with our dynamic, what they consider Asians to be the model minority, and then and unfortunately on the other end of that stereotypical divide, it's the black people, right? Yeah. And obviously, if you guys don't know me and Karmel's my brother to death. We don't see race, we just see Alan and Karmel.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the same token, society doesn't see us as Alan and Karmel, it says Asian Alan, black Karmel. So I guess with all that being said, and with that thing, kind of what's your take on that comment towards me? And then I guess what's your take on that perspective that she gave?
I think a lot of people, and this is part of the reason why I don't like racism. It's a lot of part of our entire society. It's very one side versus the other. So it's very black and white to use that. And that's honestly where racism and our whole ethnic categorization started, is just creating in the census. I think 1970 when they created the census to separate, not 1970, before that, but anyway, to create distinctions of what people were. It's all money. It's a money play. But then that takes a whole nother avenue when we start separating okay, we're minority and then everyone else basically being white. But slowly that's become black people and then everybody else. But literally the minority of folks is everyone else who's not white. But because black people have come into the forefront of the civil rights movement and most racial stigmas, as you just mentioned, and anything that's considered derogatory or negative towards races, it starts with us. Okay. So when you look at an Asian that's like you said, a model minority, it's almost well, you're not really a minority really, because you're kind of what the majority would prefer to do business with, to be involved with, even relationally or whatever, and we're not. So I understand what they're saying. They just don't get to the fact that you're still a minority.
Right.
You feel Chinese and Japanese people and Koreans have, Cambodians, all Asian nationalities have experienced racism in this country. Japanese internment camps wasn't not too long ago that they experienced that. Right. And even to this day, you have people who treat Asian people, a little different than other people.
Right. So now with that being said, I don't mean to cut you off, but so now do you feel that being black, because we're talking we're saying, usually when it comes the most negative stereotypes, and when it comes to minority, do you feel as a black person that starts off with you as a minority and then everybody else kind of is a minority, but they don't experience the negative stigmas as much as yourself as a black person?
Yeah, of course. And then that's, whether it's a bad thing or a good thing, I don't know, that's immaterial. But it's we do experience the most, one, because we're probably the most visible. We are the darkest of all the minorities. And, to be honest, black people in general typically have been in the forefront of every industry and have, done very well. And that stands out. And I also hate this distinction as it being the first black this or first minority to do that. So when you continue just making that, okay, we get it now. And then I guess the model, the standard for the minority making it is what the black person did. Then they become the minority label. So I think but then that's dumb because honestly, if all the minorities were together, we would be the majority.
But it shouldn't be just a white or not white.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It's created to be that way. And then it's funny now, we're fighting over being a minority.
Right. And you know what? And that's the one thing I have experienced as an Asian person, right? What's crazy is that from an ethnic standpoint, if you guys don't know, I'm actually adopted by white people, but it's not like somebody looked at me and goes, oh, you're white, right? Or you behave white. No, I was treated as an Asian person. But there's just like there are stereotypes and negative stereotypes about black people, there are I know that this is going to be funny or whatever, but with Asians, it's well, you guys aren't good at sports. Asians, you guys are, small penis jokes. I've heard those left and right. And the one thing I do get and the vibe that what I've experienced, right? Because I'm just going to speak on personal experience, is that those are assumed to just be funny. We make an Asian bad driving joke and we made this Asian are you good at math joke, and that's just funny. And you know what, to the point where it's been ingrained to me as a person that, hey, you're going to take it to be funny, to where now I've noticed, and I know you've seen some of my stand-ups where I just bring it out, throw it out on the table. But I noticed, and the more and more I used to dive into that, I spoke about that because if I say it first, if I use it as a weapon against myself, you can't use it as a weapon against me.
100%.
And I didn't even notice I did that until pretty recently. I'm well, why do I keep making this Asian joke? Why do I keep making this Asian comment? And then for me, and I don't want to say white people or whatever, but when it comes to a majority crowd, for example, when I was in the Navy, I made those jokes because I know that a lot of people that I worked with that were white, that some of them were from the South, never met an Asian person in life, but they know about those stereotypes and those jokes. In order for me to break that ice with them to the point where they're comfortable to work with me, I had to put myself in that situation where I had to take that comment, right?
Yeah.
And now I will say it on one term or from one end of the spectrum to the other. But I do see it, and you're talking, I'm glad you brought up labels, because in my experience and what I've seen, and I'm not saying it's fair or not fair, but as much as Asian people are supposed to just, me as an Asian person supposed to just take those comments, those stereotypes, I feel like as a black person, if you say anything black, right, people just stop. They stop at the turn of a dime. They just stop. Yep. And oh my God, that's racist. Or even if you see, we see news reports about somebody being successful, black person does this, black person does that. You'll never see Asian person does this.
Very rarely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so now, do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I think it's, especially in comedy and just in general, it's culturally appropriate to make Asian jokes. And I think that's the case for all other ethnicities, whether it's a Mexican joke working at Applebee's, or Mexicans in a car, wetback jokes, Arab terrorist jokes. I think every ethnicity, there's some culturally appropriate, and we just expect to be able to make those jokes about any other minority or ethnic group, but black people. And I honestly don't. It's not okay with me. I don't understand why. I know why we have that protection, I guess, to not make those jokes, but it's stupid. Right. I don't care. If I'm on stage, I'll make jokes about everyone, including myself. But I don't know why your struggle or the stigmas or stereotypes against you are any less derogatory or hurtful, and I don't know why that became okay. Right. But it is, and I think that's. I don't know how to get past that. What you did is probably what I would always suggest people do. If you use it first, then you can't use it against me. And every black joke that I have heard, because this still gets told to me, or I still get, you still hear derogatory sayings. It doesn't affect me or hurt me, because at the end of the day, I'm not black. I always tell people this. Black is a term, is the label. I'm literally not black. I'm Karmel. So that's it.
Right.
If I have to fill out some paperwork, then I put down African American and Native American. I don't even, if there's black there, I don't even put black, because that was created to dignify or say something about me that it really doesn't. Right. so I've always tried to fight those labels and fight that, but like it's an uphill battle, and I'm not trying to change our senses and how we record people, but I think on an individual how we relate to one another. I think it's up to us to start creating more, I guess safe ways to communicate. And at the same time, like honestly, I have boys who are of all ethnicities. We say stupid stuff to each other all the time. Right. And it's okay, because in that scope, it's like, it's still love. Right. This is the homie. Right. But like when you're out in a rally and, a Trump supporter or just a redneck of any kind is just talking trash about you for whatever reason, just because you happen to be that color that's not them. Right. It's hurtful and it's silly. And I don't know why we allow that. Like, why is that okay? Right. Oftentimes it's because it's the majority saying is we can't do much about it, but I'm glad you bring up that and the SantaCon referencing yourself. If you guys haven't seen Karmel, Karmel on stage, very rarely have I ever heard a black joke from you. I don't think I actually have, because and that's the thing is, you're not a black comedian. You're Karmel. That's a comedian that happens to be black, right? And that's one thing I do appreciate. That's why I love watching you on stage, because you definitely personalize yourself and you don't label yourself. Yeah. They go back into labels, and that's another thing that too. And I think that's my first experience with racism, more of on like a government institutional type thing, is we're talking about on the Scantrons, we're talking about Black, Native. I remember as a high school student, I had to, and it was at the time, back in, I graduated 05, so back in 04, 05, whereas an Asian applying for UCs, my scores had to be better than a white person's, because the stereotype is Asians are smarter. So my SAT scores had to be smarter. So me as an Asian, so for example, a 4.0 Asian person had to be is like equivalent of a 3.7 white person and a 3.1 or a 3.3 black person, which is racist in its entirety. And although like the affirmative action thing says, hey, we want to give everybody a fair chance, it almost, for me, it's like, how can you, if I let's say I get a 3.9 and Karmel gets a 3.4, but because of this affirmative action thing, it allows you to get into the school that I want to, even though you have less credentials than I do. And then that almost in itself, in my opinion, promotes racism. It does. Because it's like, well, why does this black person, because he's black, like that doesn't make any sense. And I never liked affirmative action. I never liked it. I mean, it got to the point where just recently, have you heard of the Harvard affirmative action thing that happened with the Asian American students? Yes. So to enlighten people onto this, so back in 2017, Asian American committee pretty much sued Harvard, pretty much because universities at the time, and they removed it, were allowed to make character opinions or character development to see how they fit into that culture. And one of those attributes that they're allowed to look at were race and were ethnicity. And they found out that Asians were on the bottom of that totem pole, kind of go into the stereotype that we're talking about. Asians had to perform better. And to the point where the Department of Justice stepped in and had to remove that. And it's barely been removed. Now, I think that our society right now has a problem with it's not only is it like, because it's not a problem with regards to legal rights. Like anybody that's racist, anybody it's put on social media. It gets shut down. It gets addressed. Right. Sure. Well, there's laws against it. But I think there's never been more of a time where it's not really racist or the divide of races, but more of like the divide of labels, Trump supporters, not Trump supporters, left, right. Like there's still the black, white, Mexican, Asian, but now it's like, you're not a minority, but now what kind of minority are you? Like, are you allowed to do this, this, and this? And yeah, I think that's why every time politics gets brought up, I hate it, because it's divisive in its nature. It's red and blue. It's Democrat, Republican. I've always said I would be so down for a new party. Just create several parties. That'd be amazing. Like, why is there just two? I want several parties and several different ideas and agendas and, political strategies. Like, let's look at a whole bunch of different things to combat. Give us something new to spice up everything, instead of just this rich person and that rich person. Right? It's like, it's stupid, but like, yeah. And now, like, even with like the LGBTQIR elemental P, society and their whole community, like they keep adding like another letter to their acronym to make distinctions to another person. And that is another minority group that's starting to come out. Yes. So yes. All right. So now I got to ask you from your personal experience, have you
Have you experienced racism when as a younger child? Do you think and I guess like how did you handle that?
Oh yeah.
Is there anything that really sticks out in mind?
Easily, probably the first thing that's the biggest time I experienced racism was in, I want to say 7th grade, in Downey at West. You went to Griffiths, right? You went to West, right? You went to West, yeah. I'll leave the teacher's name out of this. So I did a project on the book Animal Farm, which is a great book.
Amazing book.
Great book,
amazing
right?
Book, amazing book.
I built a farm out of like clay and Legos, and it was just a dope farm. I was so proud of this thing. So long story short, part of making it, I had to use some rubber cement. In this class, the teacher asked the students where the rubber cement went. There's a whole bunch of rubber cements out there, but she said, we're missing one. I'm like, okay. So I got blamed for it. Out of 30 students.
For no reason.
For no reason. They said, Karmel, can you come to the office? Ms. Such and Such wants to talk to you about some missing rubber cement. I'm like, okay. I go to the office, and I meet with the counselor there, who was a noted just asshole. And he's like, yeah, Miss Such and Such said you stole the rubber cement. Not like it's missing, do you know where it's at, but you stole it. And I'm like, who steals rubber cement, first of all? What am I doing with this? Like why? And then I'm like, no, I didn't steal it. Like, I was in class building my project like everyone else was. So I sat in the office for like 4 hours. Mom comes down. They talked to her about it. She asked me. I'm like, no, why would I steal rubber cement? It was like $3 at Walmart. No, I'm not. I'm stealing rubber cement. Anyway, the way I was addressed in that office with the counselor and the principal, I felt like the only reason I got picked out because I was the only black kid in the class, and that's the first time it kind of like okay, that's what that is. Because like I was thinking I was 12 maybe. And I grew up in Compton and Linwood, and like, in the hood, there's not much racism going on. And Downey it wasn't as mixed as it is now. So finally kind of getting out of my, first environment into the second environment that kind of made sense that'd be at the time that happened. And it was mind-boggling. It was super hurtful because I'm like, why? Because not only that, I built which I got an A+ on. I got an A+ on the project. But now I'm getting blamed for stealing supplies.
So was that the first time as a kid then? Did you kind of notice that you were like a black person that was the only black person that was in
Yes.
there? Okay.
Yeah, so that's when I became very aware of my color.
Okay.
Because up until then, I did not. One, like, also grew up around other black people. But then even when I moved out and there's a bunch of, white kids, black kids, Mexicans, not a lot of blacks, Mexicans, Asian kids, I still didn't notice I was black. Because I'm walking around looking out of this shell. I'm not looking at a mirror as I'm walking around all day. But that day, I felt black. I felt like, okay, you're black and we're not.
So now you were like kind of like woke from there on out.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So now how did that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, so that my mom, who grew up in the South and in the country, kind of like let me know, yeah.
Right.
This is what's going to happen.
Right.
And like, be prepared for it. Like, this is like, you're not yet an adult, but you can't wait till you're an adult to start understanding that you look different. And so I was like, okay. And I wasn't like the worst experience at that school. I had a great time. Gary went to that school. I forgot. But yeah, that's like the first time I experienced it. I was like, okay, now I just knew now how to just kind of deal. And it's funny because growing up in Downey, and if you know anything about Downey, some of the cops are kind of racist. And I've had 2 incidences with cops as in junior high and once in high school where I was thinking I was black. But after that incident, honestly, I was kind of ready for it. So I was kind of, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be sitting on the curb at 8:00 at night just because I'm not at home.
So regularly, you kind of like from there on out, it's not exactly a paranoia, but an awareness that like, hey, sometimes
complete awareness.
Sometimes you're going to get pulled over because you're black. Sometimes you're going to get stereotyped because you're black. Now, did that change your behavior, or did that just change your approach to certain situations?
Like, it kind of does change your behavior because it does make me. It made me feel a little bit less like, okay, be yourself. Like, people start. It's always a stereotypical saying about how black people act. We wild, we wilding out, we crazy, and yeah, we do. I'm gonna be honest with you. Black people typically we take it another notch. We go a little higher than everybody else do. So that's just how we are. Whatever. So maybe I didn't act as crazy as usual. I still had a good time, and I was always like the funny cat on campus, and I was like that in high school. But I probably was a bit reserved just in certain situations or environments where I'm like, okay, there are people here I don't know. There might be like authority figures around that will single me out if I'm acting crazy. And it just becomes something that's just in the back of your head. It's not like you're kind of walking on, pins and needles. You're just like, okay, right, just chill out for a minute and whatever. And if you're back to the, a place where you feel comfortable, just be you. But no, you're always kind of aware after that, something like that. Because that was so like, it hit me hard as a seventh grader. Like, why? Still to this day, I'm like, rubber cement? Like, that's not like, maybe that was going to get high or something on it. I don't know.
I don't know. Getting high.
It's like glue. It's like glue, I think.
People get high off anything these days.
Yeah. So.
But you know what's crazy? So you're talking about when you're 12 years old. I think one of my first experiences facing racism was actually being that. Like, I think 12, 13 is when you start noticing the other sex, when you start noticing like, hey, I actually like women, I'm going through puberty, all those hormones. I remember like as a 12-year-old sitting there, I'm like, started liking all these girls, started liking whatever. And when it comes like to the dating spectrum, like, why is it that, I would like talk to her like, oh, I don't like Asians. Right? I remember heard that first distinctly. Wow. And I remember sitting there, I'm like, well, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like, I don't get it. And that's when I started realizing, because I grew up in Claremont. They're pretty diverse. You got kids from Pomona, you got kids from everywhere. They're Mexican, black, white, Asian. There's a fair diversity. So I didn't really see race between like one or the other until then. That's when I started realizing. And then what's kind of crazy, because I didn't realize how much it affected me until I remember like AOL chat was still popular back then. And when people would ask me, what did you describe yourself as? I actually said white. Because I actually was almost, I didn't even notice it, but I was ashamed to be Asian at the time. And then from there, like I remember in middle school, all my friends were black. Right. I was noticed as and just kind of funny how you said how you act black. I was with all my black friends. They're like, oh, you're one of us. You're one of us, whatever. So I was wearing like FUBU. I was wearing
cross colors.
I was doing all that stuff. Right. And then, I'm still wearing Tim's. I love the culture. I really, really do. Right. I love, and it's funny because if I still, and it's even crazier now because if I go to social settings, I feel more comfortable approaching black people and as a group, and I get along with them a lot better than I do with Asians. But then on the same token, Asians we'll still see each other. But it's funny because kind of how that culture and how that shaped me is by the time I got to high school, like even when I started dating, I noticed that like a lot of Asian girls were going to white people, and I kind of had a resentment towards Asians. It wasn't until my mid-20s so I started actually dating Asian girls. Wow. But now, being in Claremont, bordering Pomona, the main women that didn't like Asians were Mexican women. So from there on out, it was kind of crazy because I'm trying to figure out, like, because we all know both my daughters are half Mexican, right? And I'm thinking in my head, like, well, just like anything else, like, well, why am I so attracted to Mexican women? Why do I love Latinas so damn much? Kind of doing like, well, their accent, like whatever. Like, no, me as a person, me growing up as a kid, I finally noticed they were the hardest ones to get. And then, because then it'd be like, because I remember when I was dating my ex-wife, when we were just dating, like Mexican guys were like, why the fuck you with this chino right here? Why you fuck with this, and this? And I'm like, holy shit. But then that kind of developed me into a point where I'm like, look at, like, I'm not going to fit your Asian stereotype. I'm not going to be just your math nerd. I'm not going to be this, like, well, I'm going to go play football. I'm going to go lift weights. I'm going to go date all these other women because we're on the bottom of and I had to like, and for some reason, I don't know if I had to prove something to somebody or I ended up having to prove something to myself. And it wasn't until I finally realized, like, who the hell am I? Why am I trying to like do this? Why am I trying to prove something to somebody else? Why am I so angered at my own ethnicity? Why don't I just embrace it? And it was finally then, I think, where in my mid-20s where I'm just like, you know what? Asian women are beautiful. Why am I neglecting? Why am I being so upset? Right. Why am I, holding myself back based on this negative stigma, this negative stereotype? But I mean, dude, it took a long time for me to like kind of go that. And I didn't even notice that about myself until years later.
Wow. I mean, that's honestly, I never really thought about that. Like as a kid growing up, like the girls you like or don't like you, or like could kind of shape your idea about your race and ethnicity. Like, again, going back to like in junior high, there was like, a few girls I liked, and I never had like like black girls or like Mexicans or Asian or white. I didn't care. Pretty girl's a pretty girl. It wasn't until like I think high school where I felt the like, I guess not reverse racism, like kind of like the culture started flipping towards like, oh, get you a black guy.
Oh, is that where like once you go black, you don't go black?
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I never heard that. Again, growing up in Compton and in Linwood, everyone's black. So I don't really hear, or that wasn't like a term here. So then, and I didn't hear it in junior high, but in high school, I'm like, oh, like you're kind of preferred in a low key way. And I'm like, well, why? Like what makes me different from anyone else?
Well, that's when interracial dating started becoming more and more prevalent, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Jungle Fever came out about that time with Wesley Snipes and
yeah, I know what you're talking
about. But I think that's when I started realizing, okay, like this is kind of a cool thing because like, you know, we're funnier, or we sing, we jump, we run, whatever. Like, what is it about us that makes people more attracted to us? But at the same time, I still kept experiencing the ugly side of racism. So it's really weird. Like when one side's kind of pulling you closer, and at the same time you're getting pushed away.
Well, so is that what you're talking about? The ugly side getting pushed away in a sense?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it's like, like I would be afraid to probably even approach a white girl. Because just like, well, I'm pretty sure parents are not going to be not going to approve of me.
Do you still feel that way by any chance?
No, I couldn't care less.
No, okay.
I don't care.
But back then,
oh sure,
right.
Yeah. Because like as a kid, again, you don't know much about yourself yet.
Right.
You just know, okay, I like you, but I don't know what even to do with my hormones and this. Let alone having a second and third layer of like the racism and ethnicities and differences between us, and then like what your parents might think about this, what people might think about this. So I'm just like, okay, I didn't date anyone in high school. Like I think the first girlfriend I had around that age was actually in church, not at my school. I think I just graduated, and she was white. But what's funny is completely like not the typical white person. I shouldn't say that. She wasn't like the model. She was a very gothic looking girl, which like we were a completely odd couple.
I can't imagine you with a goth.
Oh my God. Like her whole crew was so like, but that kind of like, I like those kind of cats. I like people who are just different.
Wow.
And so I remember at church, her whole crew was like just blacked out everything, crazy lipstick and whatever.
What? I'm still mind blown by this.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
A crazy story with her. Like, so we started dating, and like my homie was like, "You with such and such?" I'm like, "Yeah, man. Like, she's pretty. I don't care if she dresses weird and all that.
Right.
She's super cute to me." And then like after we stopped dating, he like hit me up like a month later, like, "Yo, you still talking to such and such?" I'm like, "No, we're cool."
Were you the first black person that she ever dated as well?
Yes.
So now, did she ever tell you about that experience? Like if she was getting...
No, because which was cool about her and her whole crew is they didn't really care. That's kind of why we dated, because like it's just, I like you, you like me. It wasn't even about like, oh, you're my first black guy, or like this is an interracial thing. It's like we're just kicking it. We just like each other. And that's kind of how I've always been with people. Just like I don't like any distinctions, whether it's even good or bad. I don't want any affirmative action.
Right.
Would help me. I really didn't want it. I didn't care about that. So no, and so that relationship it never even came up. It wasn't even like an issue. To people on the outside looking in, it was like, oh wow, you dating a white girl. Like, oh man, such and such was crazy, and I'm dating a black guy. I'm like, oh.
Right.
Okay, I didn't know that was.
Well, no, that's pretty awesome that you guys overcame that. And what's crazy about that? So I do remember like my ex-wife's dad, because I know that when I would get introduced as like, oh, this is my boyfriend, this is the kind of person I'm dating, they would look at me like, oh, he's Asian, he's harmless, right? Like he can't do anything, right? But I have heard, especially with my ex-wife's dad, like, well, yeah, as long as he's not black, it's okay. And it's like, wow, that's like really aggressive. And like I'm saying, it's crazy because I'm on one end of the spectrum where like, oh, he's Asian, he's gonna be a doctor, he's gonna be harmless, he's practically a Pokemon that's out of his little Pokeball, right? He's not going to do anything, that's be like, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, to understand, like hearing the other under and the thing is, my older daughter, her godfather's black. My best friends growing up were black, and that's kind of crazy. So now, like I said, in general, like I don't think racism is as prevalent as it was back then. I think there's more But I think it's one of two things, and it's kind of crazy how I think it two ways, right? I think from a law standpoint, you can't be racist because everything is abolished, every segregation, everything is there. But I feel like more and more now, people segregate themselves, holding those labels against themselves and victimizing themselves based on those labels. Like I was saying, the example I used earlier, right? Because my friend, well, not my friend, not anymore at least, because I don't take that comment really nicely, right? And she was holding herself back. It's like, I can't wear my hair like this. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I've seen that multiple times. I see that a lot. It's not just with black people. It's sometimes with Asian people, sometimes with Mexican people. Now, have you seen the same things? And do you think it's kind of correct in the sense of what's going on?
Well, I think social media has allowed people to feel more like safe to sometimes say things out loud because they're at home on a phone. So like, I think in a way it's kind of revealing certain things about people. At the same time, people can also put on, these fronts. But I think when you say something like that and then it's kind of incendiary and people jump in and, okay, that's how you really feel. I think that's fine. I think now that's really who you are, and that's cool. But I think racism in and of itself, I don't know that it's kind of taken different shapes and forms. It's definitely not as open as you say, because like laws and stuff like that have kind of like hindered from someone from being openly racist, whether it's employment or this, that, and the third. But like in some ways, it kind of still exists, and we're seeing it like, of course, with our current president and the whole people who supported him and just openly at rallies and protests, whatever, just are just blatantly, openly racist and bigots to people. But then like we have a time more than ever where we can voice our opinion in equal to the person who is opposing us. I think that's the biggest thing with any of the civil liberties and fights we've had since, MLK and everyone, that just allow us to, say our piece, give us what's, should be rightfully ours. But then there's still some things like with our prison systems that are blatantly racist too. People don't look at it that way because they don't see those numbers every day. But most of the men incarcerated are black. Yet we make up 13% of this population. And that's very disproportionate. So those are the kind of things I think people still aren't aware of. Even like when people talk about, slavery was abolished in 18th, it wasn't abolished, it was changed. So like slavery still exists in our Constitution. It's just been shifted into our prison system. Because it literally says in our Constitution, you can be made a slave through our prison system. It's literally written in our laws. So I think people don't see that. And then that's one of our biggest industries is the prison system. Like America has the biggest prison system in the world. Yet I
did not know that.
Right, but we don't have the biggest population. In fact, I think our prison population is bigger than China's and India's combined. Which those two countries have like 1 billion and 1.5 billion people both. And I think America's 380 right now. Like we're nowhere near the billions, but our prison population is way bigger than that. So I think that's kind of how racism still exists. But again, I think we have powers and abilities now to fight those things. It's just a matter of people getting together. 'Cause that's the thing that's my biggest problem is people don't know how to like link up.
Right.
I think like you said earlier, people are like segregating themselves. Like I'm this, I'm that, I'm over here, I do this thing, People have the craziest labels to say, I'm a left wing such and such, or I'm a right wing. Like, who came up with these titles? Like, what?
Why were these labels?
Why are you labeling yourself? Like,
I think that has a lot to do with, like you're saying, media, right? Because like I said, the last time, like I referenced earlier, how many times have you seen like Trump supporter does this, or black person does that, Mexican person does this? Again, it doesn't happen too much with Asian or this, and this. But because a lot of that media is driven by clicks, views, clickbait, as we say, right?
Very much clickbait.
And now, because we're very impressionable as people and because we're so influenced by media and social media, although I hate referencing a lot of things, I think this is actually where this comes from more than anything else. Even though we have and that's another thing, even though we have the right to voice our opinion, we also have a right to write our own course and control our own narrative. Like, for example, I do know the negative stereotypes that are upon Asian people, But what can I do? I can honestly overcome those by just A, not feeling them, and B, when they happen, turn the other cheek. You know, I don't think there's any good that's going to come out of being combative. And then on top of that, I don't think just because I've faced not segregation, but discrimination, I should discriminate against anybody else. Because I know this is going to be a very unpopular opinion. There has never been more of a time to be white in America, because I feel like white people can't say anything anymore. And I see it with, like, you know, my parents. I see it like my parents are not racist in any way, shape, or form. But I know that if they were to make even when they make comments about race, and even just a basic observation, you know, when they said something about black, when they said something about this, I'm like, oh, but like, wait a minute, that's media telling me that a white person can't say something else about that, even though it might be true. But now it's like, because how many times for example, like I've seen like, oh, white people do this, this, and this. But if you're to take that same contest and say a black person does it, like now that's racist. But white people can't do that. And just like we're saying with Trump supporters, and I'm glad you're saying it, but there is now a negative stigma saying that all Trump supporters are now racist, even though there's still a lot of black supporters that do support Trump. But the I don't want to say like the left, you know, kind of approaches it in that way, but they do say like, well, that's the stigma they push, is that Trump supporters are racist. And just because there are racists that support Trump doesn't mean that all Trump supporters are racist.
Yes.
But now you're getting at the point where in the streets, I can't tell you how many videos where I've seen somebody whoop a Trump supporter's ass because they support Trump, right? Which, if you think about racism, it's pretty much a prejudice, and assuming that said prejudice based on that said person, what they affiliate themselves with. So how is that any different about being negative and whooping a Trump supporter's ass because they support Trump?
It's not.
It's the
not
same.
Different. And I completely agree. Like, and again, Trump supporters who are racist are typically the loudest, and although they don't speak for the whole group, when we hear it, or the media, you know, puts it out there and makes it and amplifies it, we take that to mean they're all like that.
Right.
But like, again, we don't sit down and dialogue with people on one-on-one at all. We don't sit down and have a conversation to understand someone's point, their perspective, talk to them about how they really feel about such and such. You're that? Okay, I know what you are, and I'm done.
Right.
So I think a lot of that is the media's fault, social media's fault. And our fault of our own. Like, I as much as possible put down my phone and just try to like listen to people and talk. Like, I just posted this the other day, like on my Facebook, where do people find these fake news articles?
I remember this. Yes.
Because I don't know how I don't know what you're doing when you find these random websites that have the most stupidest names, and you post this article that looks obviously fake on your Facebook. I don't know where they're at during the course of their day, but it happens so often, and people take it as gospel.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not true. And they're gone. So like, I'm more like, okay, like, can you tell me what you really think about this situation without the news, without the media, without social, Facebook, whatever, and tell me how you just feel about it? Oftentimes, people won't know. There's a video I was going to post yesterday when this newscaster asked this probably about 22-year-old Trump supporter what he thinks the greatest thing his president has done.
Oh, I've seen that one.
Have you seen that?
And he is like, I have no idea. I just support him.
I'm like, oh my God. Like, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. Like, that's literally, he doesn't know what he's doing. He just sees something.
But there's a lot of people that do the same thing.
Oh,
that they just say, hey, well, you know, Trump's a terrible president. Trump's a racist. Like, all right, well, tell me one thing that Trump's done racist, right? And then he can't tell me. Well, he said those bad tweets. What tweet? You know? I do want to go back on what you're saying, right? With regards to saying like that you like to go back on like, all right, put your phone down, hear somebody else out. And I feel like that's a lot of people, what they lack is empathy and compassion. But because it's like, for example, right, if you say something black, you know, well, I can't relate to you, so it can't be real. I can't be whatever. But this is exactly why I wanted to bring the show on, is because it's like, hey, well, let's get back to this point where we can talk and be like, hey, this is how it made me feel. This is how I grew up. This is what I ended up believing, because society told me to do one thing, and because society didn't tell you the other. It doesn't mean that you can't A, relate to it in some manner, shape, or form, or B, if you can't be compassionate, but like, all right, well, that's where you're coming from. I get it, and I respect it. You know, so now I feel like that is actually what we should be driving to, and that's where humanity should go towards, so that we can actually find resolve, get rid of those divides. So now, outside of discussion, compassion, all of the things, what do you think now? A, do you think that's the way that we should go? And B, how do we get back to that course and find that resolve and finding tolerance.
I think we have to like, I know everyone talks about educating everyone and like teaching people about their ethnicity and their culture. I think people have to want to know that. Like, there's some people who just don't want to know about black people, and just leave it at that. Like I'm not gonna try and change someone's mind that lives in Alabama that just hates my people. Okay, that's cool. I'm not gonna waste my time. I'm also not gonna combat you, like you said. There's no point in fighting.
There's no
you.
point.
I'm not gonna go that
100%.
route. But I'm gonna find the people who want to know about me and learn about me and talk about me and learn about my people and everything about me, because I want to know about them. So I think the people who want to know about each other, who want to link arms, who want to have, these kind of conversation discussions, need to do it more. And I think we need to do that more visibly, because what we see more often is the fights, the protests. We see more of the cop pulling over the black guy and him getting shot. We don't see more of the cop helping the family down the street or taking care of this or saving this guy's life. We see more of the negative. I've always wanted to create a news channel that only reported positive news. Stuff. Only, like, would not. If you submitted us something, we would not show it. Like, it's only positive stuff. Because I think that's what makes people think what they think now is the news and the media. So why not create a source of news that's only putting out positivity?
So now, do you think naturally, because I feel like there's one of two ways we can approach this right now, not approach this, but I feel like we are built in one of two ways. Either A, we want to create a narrative and stick to it, or be open to learning. What do you think we're more prone to do naturally?
Probably the former. I think people are more aligned with, like, you create the narrative and stick with it, because people don't like change, and to learn is all about changing. I mean,
to have humility to understand that.
That's hard for people to do. And I mean, and also you have people who are stuck in the ways. Like, if it's like, your aunt or uncle, like, even if they like black folks or they like different ethnicities or whatever, they know what they know. But this time it's like, okay, like it's really hard to like change their minds on things. So I think it's more about like for example, the whole labels thing. I try to teach people about not calling even Native Americans, because even that term's derogatory. Mm-hmm. And I would never forget someone like, how? That's the politically correct term. First of all, I said politically correct is not politically correct.
Amen to that. Yes.
Like, you really just said politically correct. Like, you're not getting what you're saying, right? So I said, think about this. The reason why being Native American, the reason why Native American is not the proper term is because we don't call ourselves that. Now, what are we supposed to call you? I'm like, what tribe am I from?
Right.
Like, I don't know. That's where you start.
Right. Amen to that.
That's my name. Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Navajo. That's their names.
Right.
You calling them Native Americans, that's like, who lives here? Oh, Mike lives here. Oh, I live here now. Right? And I call it my house. Then John, this is John's house now, right? And you're a native of John's house. Wait, I was here first. Why am I a native of a place you named?
Right.
Like, America is named after Amerigo Vespucci, the Italian explorer. So now the natives who were here are named after him?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense.
Right.
But it's better than calling them Indians. They're both bad.
They're both terrible, right.
And then so I got another argument about that. It's like, even Indians aren't called Indians.
Right.
That country was not called India.
Right. They just thought that they landed in India.
Right.
And then they start calling them Indians.
So here's how it gets even deeper. So the real India, right, was also named by Europeans.
Oh, I didn't know that. What?
Right? It was called India because of the Indus River.
Right.
But those people, on Wikipedia, you can look this up. It's called Bharat. And people who are Indian will tell you, no, yeah, that's what we call it. But Brits came over. Oh, hey, this looks cool. Here's a river. We're named after this river. Like, no, we already named it, guys. We got a name for it. No. We got a name for it. So, like, that's my problem. Is like, there's so many layers of things that are wrong that we need to change. It's like, where do we really start?
Yeah, but you know what the thing is, though? I feel like there's a lot more people that are stuck in their narrative are the louder people. But I feel like the majority of people that are, in my opinion, woke. I like using that word. I don't know why, but it just sounds hip and that sounds cool.
It's hot.
Right. But the ones that are more aware and the ones that realize, or the ones that think that we can't change irrational people by pure rationality, are the ones that would rather stay quiet. And I feel like that's actually why more and more people are staying in their own narrative rather than combating that narrative. And that's the thing is, right, just like you're saying, like, hey, well, it's kind of like too much work. I actually am on the other end, where if you ever see me on my social media things, I don't really argue. I more of try to find, I don't try to be right. I try to find out what's right.
Sure.
And try to go from there. And it's like, because I do feel like we're getting away from being tolerant. I think we are getting way too stuck in our narrative. And I see more and more and more, if I post something that's not of their narrative, completely off. Now I'm an asshole. I've been called a moron left and right.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And what's funny about that is when I got called a moron, the guy had used 8 different type of yours and was all incorrect. Didn't use capitals. I'm like, all right. And it's funny because then I post about being tolerant and like, hey, let's like you're saying, like, well, if this other person, doesn't agree with you, instead of going all ape shit on him, how about we find out why he thinks that way?
Yeah.
And then if you don't agree, we can agree to disagree. 100%. Mind fucking blowing, right? Being tolerant.
That's so hard in this day and age, just agreeing to disagreeing. Like I love having debates, and I'm on Facebook often, chopping it up about different things. And yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not gonna cram my ideas down your throat. I'm gonna open it up for discussion, hear what you have to say. I'm gonna have my opinion that I'm open to changing. My perspective and view won't, because these are my eyes.
These are right.
I can't change that, but I'm willing to hear. Okay, that's really what it is. Okay, cool.
But the thing is, you can also. But for me, like like for example, like when I started posting a lot about my political stuff from my perspective, I started my views a lot changed with it a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Like for example, I'll be the first one to admit that, like, when Trump became president, I wasn't a Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. But and in all reality, I'm not exactly a Trump supporter. I am a whoever's running this country supporter. Sure. Because what brings us together is to understand that we're like we're saying, first we're Americans, then we're either a Republican or a Democrat or independent or whatever. But what's gonna bring us together and get better positive results is finding, getting rid of our differences, is finding the commonalities. Like, you're a person, I'm a person. Okay, we want what's best for our country. Let's go from there, right? Sure. And that's, I think, that's I think what we need to get to in order for us to become tolerant. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like racism isn't more about being disruptive and being destructive. I think it's more about actually finding tolerance than it is anything else.
Sure.
Finding the underlying things that brings us together and then using that instead of pointing out the differences.
So then on that note, do you think the majority wants to be together?
I think the majority wants to be different, but it's not in a matter of being selfish with regards to race. But the first differences that we pick amongst ourselves is our physical differences. Height, weight, shape, race. The first thing is always race, And so I think that naturally is what makes us exclusive in our own manner. Because, we do promote individualism. So I do think we're taught and we're brought up to be thought of self first, then community. Sure. And I do think it needs to change drastically. And I think, and also with that being said, I think we need to start pulling our heads out of the media's ass and stop looking at like black this, black that.
That's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough.
But like, even with like bringing up Mexicans and like the whole wall and Trump's whole thing about that, like I think on average that means 170,000 immigrants come from Mexico every year. And then like, they're not the number one immigrant to this country. Is actually Chinese. I think they were like 185. But there's no talk about like stopping Chinese coming in. He picked Mexicans for whatever reason. That was his.
Well, I'm gonna discuss this, right? So he does talk about immigrants, but naturally now we're at the point though when we think immigrant, we think Mexican. But I don't think that's influenced by Donald Trump. I think that's influenced by our own cultural upbringing. Okay. But what do? We point to Donald Trump and say that was him.
Well, he did say Mexicans.
He said Mexicans at one point, but but the biggest border that's at stake right now is a Mexican border. And in all reality, the easiest way to illegally cross into America right now is through walking across that border. Then it is to come over on a boat. Right.
Sure, of course.
And that's assuming that Asians got over on a boat, right? But in all reality, how else are people from China going to get here, right? We're not going to take a subway from China,
sure,
right? So I think that's one of those things we kind of need to realize. Like, for example, I don't want to bring things up from the past too much, but like when everything was happening in Baltimore, like where they black this, black that, black this, and although they were correct, like have you ever been to Baltimore?
I have not.
Though in Baltimore, the main area.
No, I'm sure I have been. I've been once.
So the majority of the population, when I went to Baltimore, was black.
Very black.
And so that's why, like, so by default, if a 90% population of a certain area is black, and that's where they're getting arrested, you're gonna have a 90% chance you're gonna pick up someone that's black. That's like kind of like a by default thing.
Yeah.
But in general, like, we don't need to point those numbers out with regards to having that kind of a divisive label. And that's kind of like what I wish we would get to. That's why I wish that we would go away from that. That's exactly why I really wanted to push for this, because I wanted us to discuss not only, hey, I'm Alan, you're Karmel, we've talked about so many things, and even though we're labeled like this and this, we can still get along as Alan and Karmel, still talk about those experiences that we haven't experienced, but then still be like, hey, we're still people and still get along, you know?
That at the end of the day needs to be the goal.
That does. It does.
Just get along.
That does.
Right.
Hey, Karmel, no, I know. I really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of uncomfortableness that goes along with this.
It is. And like, it's not even like, it's not hard for me to talk about. I just wish I didn't have to.
Right. But you know what? I don't like talking about it. I feel like we need to, because as much as everybody else says, hey, this is getting black, this is getting white, this is getting yellow, this is getting brown. I think we need to get back to a point where, like, well, you know what? There are still other areas that we can focus on that don't have to be negative, that don't have to promote negativity, and we can still build to a positive togetherness in some way, shape, or form.
I'm with that.
You know? I'm
with that.
All right, you guys. Well, I want you guys to look at this episode. Please. If you feel offended by it in some way, shape, or form, I kind of like challenge you guys to experience why. If you guys feel like you're talking about it, right? Speak about it, you know. And then, but on the same token, at the end of the day, everybody, please understand, like, nothing ever comes out of pointing out the differences in everybody in a negative way. You know, please find a way to come together. Let's come together. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we out.